The static began at 2:47 a.m., a trembling hiss that crawled through the lab's intercom before the lights dimmed to a feverish amber. Dr. Eleanor Voss stood frozen beside the terminal, watching the EEG lines twist into sharp peaks, pulses that mirrored the heartbeat of someone seeing disaster. Mira Elson, eyes rolled back beneath a web of sensors, whispered words that made no sense until they did. "They're falling from the sky." The room went silent, except for the hum of machinery recording something impossible. An event that hadn't happened yet. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. What happens when thought outpaces time, when memory survives before the moment it belongs to? She leaned closer to the monitor, and on the screen appeared a flickering image of two vertical shapes engulfed in smoke. The data clock stamped it. September 10th, 2000. When morning came, the footage was gone. Eleanor's drives were empty. The session files renamed to meaningless strings. David Keynes swore he saw them archived the night before, but now the timestamps were rewritten, erased as if the experiment had never happened. "You must have imagined it," Colonel Dree said over the intercom, his tone steady but false. Mira lay unconscious in the infirmary, her pulse faint, whispering fragments of a disaster she couldn't have known. Eleanor stared at the blank monitors and thought, what if imagination was the only place the truth could survive? David scrolled through backup tapes, stopping when one displayed a blurred figure near Mira Station at 3 a.m. The security feed had been partially overwritten, yet a single frame showed Eleanor herself walking into the room hours after she swore she'd gone home. She couldn't explain it. "That's impossible," she whispered, staring at her own reflection frozen on the screen. David's voice cracked. "Unless someone edited us, too." That night, Eleanor replayed the recovered audio on loop. A whisper, beneath static, repeating the same coordinates again and again. She cross-referenced them with global maps until her hand froze. The location matched an empty patch of sky above Manhattan. "Why would the mind describe a place that doesn't exist?" she muttered. The whisper on the tape responded faintly, almost mocking. "Because it will." At 3:11 a.m., the intercom crackled again. The same static, but now layered with faint voices. Mira's hospital monitor began beeping in rhythm with the sound. Eleanor ran to the infirmary, only to find Mira sitting upright, eyes open, whispering through a trembling smile. "It's already happening?" In the reflection of the window, Eleanor saw herself again. The same version as on the erased footage, standing behind her, watching. The servers hummed like sleeping animals, rows of steel and code breathing in the dark. David leaned close to the console, his hands shaking as he decrypted the final archive. A forgotten directory labeled Echo Logs. Inside were fragments, distorted voices, inverted timestamps, and one perfect image of Mira's face, surrounded by static. "This shouldn't exist," he whispered, glancing at Eleanor. Her eyes reflected the screen's blue glow as she answered quietly. "Neither should memory that predicts disaster." The air seemed to thicken, a subtle vibration running through the floor, as if the machines themselves were afraid. When Eleanor opened the recovered image, the file expanded into a looping video. Mira's eyes darting back and forth, as if tracking something unseen. Behind her, in faint reflection, appeared a pair of towers under shadow, impossibly detailed for a year-old recording. "That can't be real," David said, backing away. "It's not," Eleanor replied. "It's a premonition stored in pixels." As the loop played, the timestamp began to fade, one digit at a time, until nothing remained but the image, and Mara's eyes slowly turning toward the camera. Colonel Dree's voice filled the lab through a secured channel, cold and deliberate. "Project Orpheus no longer exists. You will cease analysis immediately." His orders felt rehearsed, his tone stripped of curiosity. "Do you even understand what we found?" Eleanor snapped. "You didn't find anything," Dree replied, You saw something that was never meant to happen. Then the connection cut, leaving only silence. David stared at her. They're erasing us next, he said. She didn't answer. Just reached for a disconnected power cable and plugged it into an unplugged terminal, whispering, "Not yet." At 4 a.m., the power flickered across the complex. David traced a fiber line to a maintenance corridor, sealed since 1999. Behind the metal door, they found an old analog archive, rows of reel-to-reel recorders still spinning, though the power had been cut. "Who's been running this?" Eleanor whispered. The reels emitted a low, continuous tone, the same pattern Mira spoke during her trance. The walls seemed to pulse faintly in time with the sound. "We're inside the recording," David murmured. "We're part of it now." Hours later, Eleanor returned to her office to find her computer's screen already on. A single message blinked across the interface. "Do not remember." She pressed a key, and the cursor moved by itself, typing new words. "You uploaded it before it was deleted." Her pulse quickened. "Before when?" she whispered. The cursor paused, then continued. "Before it happened." The monitor flickered, and for an instant she saw Mira's face again, half hidden in static, mouthing something Eleanor could almost understand. "Look behind you." The hospital reeked of antiseptic and forgotten time. When Eleanor entered Mira's room, the psychic sat motionless by the window, her eyes tracking invisible motion in the empty air. "You shouldn't be alive," Eleanor whispered. Mira smiled faintly. "I died for 3 minutes," she said, voice trembling. "That's when I saw it. The sky burning." Her pulse monitor blipped steadily. "Calm. Too calm." Eleanor sat beside her and asked the question that had haunted her since the experiment. "Did you see it before or after it happened?" Mira's smile faded. "What if there's no difference?" Eleanor brought an audio recorder from the lab, pressing it between them on the small table. "Tell me what you saw," she said. Mira closed her eyes and began to hum, low, rhythmic tones that made the air vibrate. The monitor beside her pulsed in synchrony. Eleanor's recorder flickered with interference, capturing faint mechanical whispers layered under Mira's voice. "You're not remembering," Mira said, still humming. "You're receiving." Then her eyes snapped open, pupils dilated. "They never wanted us to know we could." Later that night, David played the hospital recording back in the lab. Beneath the hum of machines came another sound, a woman's voice whispering coordinates, the same ones that had appeared in the first experiment. He adjusted the audio spectrum and froze when a faint image formed in the visualization graph. 2 towers engulfed in flame. "It's embedded in her frequency," he said aloud. "She didn't predict it. She transmitted it." Behind him, a monitor flickered to life, showing Mira's eyes staring directly into the camera feed. Eleanor returned to the hospital and found Mira's room empty. The nurses swore she'd been transferred, but no record existed. On the floor beneath the bed, Eleanor found a folded piece of paper with smeared ink. "You left the door open." Her hands trembled as she unfolded it fully. Behind the writing was a hand-drawn diagram of the lab's layout, with one room circled that didn't exist. The note pulsed faintly under the light as if reacting to her touch. "What door?" she whispered, but the walls seemed to listen. When Eleanor returned to the lab, she found the circled room exactly where the diagram said, a wall panel slightly misaligned, hiding an unmarked steel door. She swiped her access card. The lock clicked open with a sound like breath releasing. Inside was darkness, then the hum of old projectors flickering to life by themselves. On the far wall, dozens of faces appeared. Mira's, Eleanor's, David's, all repeating moments from different times. One loop showed Eleanor speaking into a recorder, whispering the same coordinates Mira had once said. She dropped the recorder from her hand. "No," she breathed. The projections began to merge, forming a single image. A burning sky reflected in countless eyes. The projectors never stopped humming. Eleanor and David sat among the flickering loops, the air heavy with burnt dust. "These aren't recordings," David whispered. "They're feedback." On the wall, the same image kept reforming, not captured from the past, but generated anew each time, slightly different, as if rewriting itself with every flicker. Eleanor's voice trembled. "It's not memory, it's residue." Her words echoed strangely, like a delayed playback. Somewhere in the projection's light, her own face mouthed those same words half a second before she said them aloud. David began testing fragments of the film stock under a microscope. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the moving granules on the slide. Each frame's chemical structure was alive, rearranging in slow rhythm, forming patterns that matched Mira's EEG data. "These images are reacting to thought," Eleanor said quietly. "But whose?" The microscope's lens fogged for a moment, then cleared. The granules had rearranged into a single chilling word, burned into the emulsion. "Remember." At night, Eleanor dreamed of walking through the lab's hallways only to find every door labeled to temporal storage. Inside each, she saw herself working, hundreds of versions of her, all repeating the same experiment. When she awoke, her notebook contained sketches of things she hadn't drawn. Mirrors, time loops, and the words, "Data precedes cause." David's voice over the intercom jolted her awake. "Come to the main terminal. It's reading timestamps from the future." On the main terminal, the new dataset displayed readings dated September 12, 2001, 23 hours in the future. The recorded frequencies matched Mira's psychic signatures exactly, pulsing like a living heartbeat. "The experiment's running itself," David said, watching the numbers climb. "It's anticipating trauma," Eleanor whispered. "Then something's about to happen again." The lights dimmed, the floor vibrated, and for a moment, every monitor flashed an identical image. A skyline collapsing in silence. They traced the resonant signals to the walls themselves. The lab structure emitted faint electromagnetic pulses identical to Mira's brain waves. "She's still here," Eleanor said softly. David ran his hand over the wall's smooth metal surface. It felt warm, almost alive. "This isn't architecture," he said. "It's memory storage." Eleanor placed her palm against the wall and felt a pulse respond to hers. A perfect echo. A whisper came through the intercom, the same voice as Mira's. "If you measure it, it becomes real." The lights flickered, and every metal panel began to vibrate, like a living organism remembering its birth. By dawn, the lab's alarms screamed, not from malfunction but command. Colonel Dree's voice broke through every intercom at once. "Project Orpheus is terminated. All files will be erased." David and Eleanor froze as the computer systems began auto-purging entire drives, lights blinking like dying stars. "He's wiping everything," David shouted. Eleanor pulled the backup reels from a locked drawer. "Then we run it before it's gone," she said. The screen flashed warnings. "Deletion in progress, 99%. Behind the static, Mira's voice surfaced one last time. "They can't erase what remembers itself." They escaped to the outer corridor where the lights still flickered weakly. Eleanor slammed her ID card into a side terminal and overrode the firewall. "I'm rerouting the backups to an off-grid satellite," she muttered. David stared at her trembling hands. "You realize this could mark us both as compromised." Eleanor didn't look up. "We already are." The console beeped once, upload complete. Then every light died, leaving them in darkness and silence. They reached the surface only to find military vehicles blocking the perimeter. Colonel Dree stood under a halogen floodlight, coat flapping in the cold wind. "You think knowledge is freedom," he said calmly, "but it's infection." Eleanor stepped forward. "You can't contain what's already escaped." Dree nodded slowly. "No, but we can erase the source." He raised a small, black device from his pocket, a memory pulse generator. The world seemed to ripple around it, the air folding like water. David whispered, "That's what they used on Mira." The pulse hit without sound, a soft flicker across vision, a heartbeat stretching into eternity. When it ended, David was on his knees, disoriented, blood running from his nose. Eleanor clutched her head, memories dissolving like melting film. "Stop it," she gasped. "You're rewriting us?" Dree approached calmly, eyes hollow. "It's not rewriting," he said. "It's returning the world to what it was." The metal walls around them shimmered, the facility beginning to fade like an old photograph left in sunlight. When Eleanor awoke, she was sitting alone in an empty room with no doors. Her badge read a different name. No records of Project Orpheus existed, but in her coat pocket, she found a small tape recorder, old, dusty, labeled in her own handwriting. The memory that survived. She pressed play. The static crackled, and Mira's voice spoke softly. "If they erased everything, you must become the record." A reflection appeared on the glass before her, herself, standing in the lab again, whispering the same words into a recorder. The loop was complete. Days passed without time. Eleanor lived inside a blank schedule. No records, no history, no past. Yet sometimes, in the reflection of her office glass, she saw the faint flicker of the old lab. Projectors, cables, Mira's chair. One night, she discovered a file buried deep in the new system under a false name. Orpheus Reentry. Inside were scanned notebook pages written in her own hand, predicting the 9/11 event a full year before it occurred. "That's impossible," she whispered, fingers trembling. But the handwriting was hers. Same tilt, same spacing, same nervous underline beneath the words. "The towers will fall." Eleanor printed the pages and laid them across the floor, connecting words and time stamps with red string. As she mapped them, a pattern emerged, coordinates spiraling inward, always returning to the same point. Her own initials. The realization struck like a pulse through her skull. "I wasn't predicting it," she said aloud. "I was remembering it before it happened." Her reflection on the window mouthed the same sentence half a beat before she spoke it, as though reality itself were lagging behind her thoughts. David found her hours later, the strings covering every wall. "You're mapping something that can't be mapped," he said gently. Eleanor turned to him, her eyes hollow. "It's not a map," she replied. "It's a memory trying to find its owner." She handed him a tape labeled "Reversal Test." He inserted it into an old player. The audio began backward, whispering their own voices. Commands, laughter, data logs, all running in reverse. Then a clear sentence surfaced, played forward through the noise. "We created the memory first." David traced the reversed audio frequencies through the signal spectrum and discovered something terrifying. The same pulse embedded in Mira's recordings now appeared in Eleanor's brain scans from years prior. "You weren't just studying precognition," he said slowly. "You were the subject." The color drained from Eleanor's face. Images flashed in her mind. The electrodes, the whispers, the lab before it was ever built. "No," she whispered, shaking. "The experiment didn't predict the future. It built it." The city outside glowed under midnight rain. Eleanor stood by the window, whispering into the recorder again. Same voice, same cadence as the tape David had found. "If memory creates reality, what happens when it remembers the wrong thing?" she asked softly. The answer came through the speaker, her own voice replying, "Recorded long ago. Then time rebuilds itself to match the memory." In that instant, the lights of the city flickered, as if the world were catching up to her thought. Somewhere deep below, in the sealed ruins of the lab, a projector blinked to life. The old facility was gone from every record, yet Eleanor found herself standing before its gate, rusted, silent, buried under ivy and time. "This place shouldn't exist anymore," David murmured beside her. "Neither should we," she replied. The door opened with a soft creak, though no power remained. Inside, the air felt heavy, like memory thick enough to breathe. The walls still pulsed faintly with warmth, whispering faint static that formed Mira's voice. "Finish it, before it finishes you." They followed the faint hum to the central chamber. The projectors flickered back to life on their own, casting the same image. A blurred skyline, smoke rising, voices whispering coordinates that no longer mattered. David connected the recorder and played the final surviving tape. Mira's voice filled the room. "We are echoes of what we've already built." Eleanor closed her eyes. "What happens if we stop listening?" The film stuttered. For the first time, it hesitated, and Mira's voice answered. "Then it stops happening." David began pulling power cables one by one. "If this place is alive, we have to let it die." The humming deepened, as if resisting. Eleanor reached the main terminal, long dead, yet glowing faintly, and saw her reflection typing commands she hadn't written. "You can't erase yourself," she whispered to it. The reflection looked up, smiled faintly, and typed a final line across the screen. "The memory is you." Then the reflection dissolved into static. The entire facility began to collapse inward, light folding like film burning through the reel. David grabbed Eleanor's hand. "We can't outlast a memory," he shouted. "Then we become one," she answered. Well, what? See. The noise reached a pitch beyond sound, a resonance that was both scream and silence. Through it, Mira's voice whispered one last time, "This is where time loops shut." Then, everything went white. A year later, a janitor cataloging forgotten university archives discovered an unmarked VHS tape. He inserted it into an old player. The screen filled with static. Then a woman's calm voice whispered, "If you're hearing this, the experiment succeeded." The image flickered. Eleanor, older now, sitting in the same white room as before, holding the same recorder. "Memory doesn't vanish," she said softly. "It just finds a new observer." The janitor leaned closer. On screen, Eleanor turned her head and looked straight at him. "Now it's yours," she said, and the tape began to erase itself.